We begin here. The United Nations Security Council will again convene later tonight in New York on the evolving situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo amid continued reports of fierce fighting for control of Goma, the capital of North Kivu in the country's east. And now this comes as the SANDF now confirms that 13 soldiers have now perished in the country, up from 9 a few days ago. Addressing the African Union Peace and Security Council on the same matter earlier today, International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola condemned the actions of both M23 and Rwanda's support of the rebel group and called on both parties to withdraw from the DRC. The head of the UN peace operations also briefed the media in New York yesterday.
We want to avoid risk of a broader war. The mission has begun temporarily relocating its personnel and their dependents from Goma over the weekend by air and road. The process is ongoing, with relocations continuing as I speak. Obviously, the safety and security of our personnel is and must be paramount. But parallel to that, of course, our colleagues from MONUSCO continue to deliver on their obligation to protect civilians to the best of their ability, and that includes disarmed combatants in conformity with international humanitarian law, and there are significant numbers of civilian and also disarmed combatants that are currently in various MONUSCO premises. The recent announcement of an upcoming meeting of the AU Peace and Security Council is very important. We look forward to further engagement by the African Union in the efforts that are currently being made with a view to bringing about a cessation of hostilities. So we count on the AU's involvement in those efforts.
For more on this, we speak to our correspondent at the United Nations Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Says UN officials describe the situation in the eastern DRC as fluid and evolving crisis on top of already precarious humanitarian situations in the eastern Congo. What more do we know, Sherwin, at this stage?
Well, the big question, Bongiwe, right now is whether Goma has in fact fallen to the rebel M23 force backed by Rwanda's defense force. What we are hearing from UN officials, this is the latest. Fighting is still ongoing for control of Goma, a very fluid situation. There are many dynamics in the town. Many UN colleagues were sent into UN underground bunkers for their safety. It's an active situation that has forced the UN also to relocate some of its staff from Goma, which is a big UN hub, to the capital, Kinshasa, and also flown into Entebbe, Uganda, across the border into Uganda, where the UN has another base. We're also getting reports from Kinshasa that unrest has been reported. We understand that a UN compound in Kinshasa has been targeted. Various embassies, including the embassies of France, Belgium, and the United States, have been set alight. Protesters are now pointing the finger at foreign interference. So the West writ large here being accused as interfering and backing Rwanda's actions, supporting the M23 in the east. This is one quote from some of the protesters in Kinshasa. What Rwanda is doing is being done with the complicity of Western governments. So this is a new narrative now that is emerging, given what is happening in the east. But I'll tell you this, the Security Council had an emergency exceptional session on Sunday, Bongiwe. It is now having another urgent meeting today. We understand that the briefers will include the Deputy Special Representative for Protection and Operations within MONUSCO, which is the peacekeeping force in the DRC, a Vivian van der Peer. We understand the DRC Foreign Minister, Therese Kaikwamba Wagner, will also brief the Rwandan ambassador. We also understand that South Africa is seeking permission to address the council again. So that intervention will be led by Matu Johini, the South African ambassador here in New York. But the big question is whether Goma has in fact fallen, but certainly from what we're gathering, it hasn't been entirely taken over by M23. Fighting continues, but later we'll get clarity certainly from Vivian van der Peer, who is in charge of operations within MONUSCO in the DRC.
And quite a critical question there, Sherwin. And staying with the Security Council, after its emergency session on Sunday, it issued a press statement condemning in the strongest terms the ongoing advances of M23, while further condemning the ongoing flagrant disregard for the sovereignty as well as the territorial integrity of the DRC. That includes, of course, including, of course, the Rwandan Defence Force. But what more did the Council as a collective say in that statement?
Right. So this was pretty much the most hard-hitting statement we've seen from the Council on the DRC in a very long time. And I think born out of growing frustration from the ranks of South Africa, from the ranks of the DRC, from the ranks of the broader international community, the United Nations in particular, that you have this foreign presence of Rwandan forces backing the Tutsi-dominated M23 in eastern Congo. So for the first time, we now hear the Security Council as a collective talking about the possibility of sanctions, right? This is what they say. They reiterated that attacks against peacekeepers may constitute war crimes. They stressed that the involvement in planning, directing, sponsoring or conducting attacks against MONUSCO peacekeepers constitutes a basis for sanctions designations pursuant to UN Security Council resolutions. They urged the parties to scrupulously abide by that ceasefire that was negotiated and mediated by Angola's president as part of the Luanda process in August last year, an agreement between the DRC and Rwanda calling for a return to the tenets of that agreement. They urged Rwanda and the DRC to return to diplomatic talks to achieve a lasting and peaceful resolution. But as you are seeing on the ground, despite this démarche, essentially, from the UN Security Council, fighting continues in eastern DRC, and that has led us to have another urgent Security Council meeting here today. So again, the Security Council essentially being ignored here by parties in a conflict, the latest here being the M23 and Rwanda.
And how is Rwanda responding, Sherwin?
Yeah, so, we heard from Rwanda's ambassador in that emergency session on Sunday, Bongiwe, and they raise particular concerns. This is what the Rwandans are saying. Rwanda says the DRC alliance with SAMI DRC, Burundian troops and other groupings, including the FDLR, which it recognizes a Hutu-dominated group, that it recognizes as a genocidal force, is constituting a major security threat to Rwanda. This, they say, is the escalation you're seeing in the eastern DRC, they say, is an internal issue for the DRC, accusing the DRC of mismanaging a complex situation on its territories. And it says the DRC is prioritizing militarization of the conflict instead of embracing regional mechanisms to foster a sustainable peace through dialogue. It's a question I then posed to the DRC's Foreign Minister, Therese Kaikwamba Wagner, on Sunday. This is how she responded. Watch it.
I think we ought to be looking at the situation on the ground right now. The situation on the ground right now is that a city such as large as Goma, with millions of civilians, is being taken in an onslaught by the Rwandan Defense Forces and the M23. Granted, every country is allowed to feel preoccupied by its safety. This is a legitimate concern, and I am not questioning it, but we have to have a clear distinction between the concern and the reality. And the reality right now is, yes, maybe Rwanda is concerned with its territorial integrity, but the DRC is the country whose territorial integrity is being violated by Rwanda. It is the DRC and the Congolese people who are being killed right now. So yes, their fears are legitimate, but they are not real. They have not materialized. We are the ones being killed. We are the ones being violated, and Rwanda is responsible for that. And this is just a very shameful way to respond, or to shy away from responding to such a responsibility that Rwanda bears. But we take note of that, and again, history will never forget and probably not forgive.
And Sherwin, we also...
Despite the finger pointing between the both sides, the Security Council, echoed by the Secretary General, has been very clear that M23 and the Rwandan Defense Forces must stop their advance on Goma and withdraw from the sovereign territory of the DRC.
And Sherwin, of course, quite strong words there, but I'm also keen to also know, of course, what the International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola had to say when he addressed the African Union Peace and Security Council that met at a ministerial level earlier today on the DRC crisis. What did he tell that gathering?
Yeah, so we don't have a video of this. Crispin Peary's spokesperson said it was a virtual meeting that was sort of hurriedly gotten together at the last moment. But this is what we got from Crispin in terms of what the minister said in that meeting. The current situation in the eastern DRC is utterly appalling and unacceptable. South Africa strongly condemns the recent activities of the M23 rebel group in North Kivu, and that now affects the capital, Goma. We also condemn Rwanda for its support of M23, as clearly proven in the UN experts' report. They called on Rwanda to cease its support for M23 and withdraw from the DRC. The unauthorized presence, he said, of the RDF, the Rwandan Defense Force, is in violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC. The AU Peace and Security Council must redouble its efforts to stop the carnage and worsening situation in eastern Congo. Recent violence by M23 with the support of Rwanda has led to the unfortunate death of 13 of our patriots who paid an ultimate sacrifice in our effort to silence the guns in eastern DRC. We once again call upon the Congolese and Rwandan governments to resuscitate talks in the context of the Luanda peace process facilitated by Angola's President João Lourenço. So, echoing statements we've heard from the Security Council, statements from the Secretary General. South Africa, of course, suffering huge losses here as part of MONUSCO and SAMI DRC, and so certainly seeking a way forward here towards peace and the withdrawal certainly of Rwanda and the M23 from that region.
Sherwin, I suppose all eyes now on the Defence Ministry and what they say then in that press briefing to give South Africans a little bit more detail about what's taking place there. But thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. That's my colleague there, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, coming to us live from New York.